Hi everyone, Michael here. Just doing a quick update video. Haven't done a video for 3 or 4 weeks. So I wanted to take a break from social media, specifically YouTube, mainly because I haven't been motivated to really make any further content other than what I've already said, because I don't believe the situation is changing too much. And I did a community post explaining my thoughts, and that I'm not in this YouTube game for views and for monetization like pretty much all other people are, or most other people are. So I'm not going to be doing daily content unless I feel it's useful. So unless I'm putting something out that I feel adds to the conversation and provides use, then I'm not going to post. I'm not a content creator posting for the sake of it. And there will be some times, like when I started the channel, I'm inspired, I've got loads of ideas, so I'll get them out. But once I start hitting brick walls and I feel it's time for me to reflect a bit and come up with more ideas and change the plan, because things are ever evolving, then I'll take a break and then I'll start doing videos again once I've learned some more, such as what I'm doing in this video. And there's 3 things I want to discuss in this video. And the first reason for the video is, or the first topic is, really just focusing on solutions. I feel that most people in this sort of trying to make the UK better movement, they just focus all their time and energy on all of the problems. And it's almost like, as Yuri Bezmenov said, it's the demoralization, or part of the demoralization. And even people who are fighting for good, all they do is produce content that demoralizes people. Because how many people go on YouTube and they just feel totally demoralized, or they watch the news and all you hear about is migration, crime, the communist government. There's no positivity, there's no solutions, they just provide demoralization. And whilst I think it's important that we learn and we understand what's going on, absolutely, people need to come up with solutions. Because I know from my personal troubles in my own life, if you spend all your time wallowing in self-pity, focusing on the problems, nothing's going to get better. As soon as you switch your focus to solutions, and if there are no solutions, on accepting the situation and moving forward as best you can, then you gain your power back. When you're focusing on the problems and there are no solutions, you become weak and you have no power. When you're focusing on the solutions, on what you can control, you gain back your power. And whilst I believe the country has a lot of problems, there's also great opportunity in these times. Like I say, there's plenty of solutions. We need a spiritual revolution. If we either have a spiritual revolution or maybe even a reformation of Christianity to make it more mystical and spiritual in nature, then that would be a great thing for our country. That's an opportunity to reform Christianity and create a real spiritual movement. In politics, there are politicians and movement that are starting to come up, such as like Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib. They're producing parties or movements that are more in the direction of where we need to go. We can start work unions rather than the communist ones we have. We can start unions for workers of the UK. We can start getting lawyers to work on plans to help us fight against all the lawfare that's being thrown upon us by the establishment. We've seen a lot of great efforts in these past few weeks on the migrant hotels because people are coming together with sensible plans and learning how to defeat the problem. And they know that going to protests, drinking beer, screaming songs is not the way to do it. And rioting, we know peaceful protest, when the communist protesters turn up doing their stupid chants, drown them out with music, and then we maintain the moral high ground, make it all about young girls being abused and them not being safe. And they can't push back against that. If a load of people turn up rioting, shouting a load of racist stuff, then the establishment will just label everyone far right and they can get away with it. But it's good to see people are becoming smart. And that if we listen to wise leaders who do things based on the spirit and with wisdom, then we can go somewhere. If we are reactionary, if something like Southport happens, something bad happens, the people react out of emotion and anger, we fall into the establishment's hands or their trap. Whereas what we need to do is think of, okay, this could happen, that's going to spark something, but we need a plan of action to say, right, people, don't riot, no violence, have a specific plan that's going to help us move forward positively and fight on our turf rather than on their turf. And that brings me on to the second point. It's about the sort of dissident national right, sort of the alt-right. I think it's become popular for people to realize that globalism has opened our borders. And myself included, I followed a lot of these dissident right characters. and dissident or even nationalist right. But what I've come to realize lately is that they don't have the answers. And a lot of the dissident right just do demoralization tactics. And some of them are basically far right. All they post about is the Jews. And a lot of them are Hitler apologists. And they'll say things like, oh, the wrong side won World War II. And a load of nonsense, which basically lacks historical context. They just get their information off 10-second TikTok videos and memes on X. And they're trying to provide a simple conclusion to a very complex matter of which they barely understand the nuances and details of those times. And again, when I question these people, they don't have any sensible ideas. Like, I will provide my immigration plan and say, right, I want England to be 90 to 95% English people. And that we can do this sensibly over a decade or so by removing all illegals, temporarily closing the border. And then you could ban Islam and then the majority of Muslims would leave. You'd cut all benefits for illegal and legal migrants. And obviously that would depend on how long people have been here. The longer people have been here, the more they would be in line with the native population. So obviously someone who's lived here multiple generations and who's assimilated, they would get pretty much equal rights to the equal rights to the English people. Somebody who's just come off a boat obviously would be removed, but even a legal immigrant who's only been here a year would obviously receive less benefits than the natural English or the well-integrated migrants. And then you would use all the money you're saving from cutting all the illegals and stuff to give tax benefits to British families who have children. And that would encourage the British to have more babies. And then what would happen is, with time, we've gone from, say, 100% ethnically English down to, I don't know, whatever it is, 60, 70%, whatever it is. And we're on our way to being a minority. What would happen is, in a decade, that would slowly return up towards the 90 to 95% mark. And then the policy would be that we maintain the 90 to 95% English nation, or English people of this nation. And then you've got 5 to 10% for good legal migrants who will assimilate in time. So that is a fair, wise, sensible plan that I think most people in this country would agree with. When I question these far right people, I say, okay, well, what's your plan then? They just go and they say, well, I don't care. I just want all of the non-white English gone. And I say, well, that's not plausible. And it's a stupid idea. I said, because how are you going to win people over when people like me, for example, my best friend in school was from Hong Kong? Are you going to deport him? Then obviously I'm going to fight you. And most people in this country will have good friends and even family members who've married other people. I know people who've married Japanese women, Indian women. So if you say you're going to deport them, you're going to alienate most of the English people who don't want their friends / new family being removed from the country. And then from there, what you're going to do, you're going to forcibly make English people living abroad. Do they have to return home? Because if it's a policy for England, then it's kind of a world policy. So all the people who naturally live nomadic lives and want to live in other countries, are you going to force them to return home? The whole policy is stupid, whereas my policy is sensible. And they think that people like me are not hardcore enough, so I'm damaging the movement to save the country, when the opposite is actually true. In that their extremism and their stupidity of thinking Hitler's fantastic and that we need to remove all migrants, they're actually harming us solving our problems, because the majority of people will never vote for their stupidity and they think that they're crazy. Whereas if I come up with a plan, or this is the general consensus that most people will come up with this type of plan, people are going to follow that and agree with that. I think the problem is people are desperate and they fall for, or extremists will try to radicalize people to join their movement. So like not literal National Socialist Nazis in the UK will try to get people who are fed up with migration to join them. Whereas I'm trying to get them to stay sensible and say that, no, the sensible position, or the fact that we don't want all these illegals here, the whole thing is absurd, and that it's not an extreme position to be against it. It's just a sensible position. You don't have to follow these extremists because they're taking advantage. And I've noticed a lot of Zoomers falling for the extremists, like Nick Fuentes, like a lot of people on X, like Steve Laws and stuff, who promote National Socialism. they're falling for these extremists who are dummies and losers and bums. And I've started to notice that a lot of dissident right I used to follow, because some of them are quite intellectual and they provide some good stuff, that they're not literal Nazis, like only a small percentage are. But I realised that most of them are just demoralisation agents, not deliberately, but all they do is moan and complain and they never have any solutions. And I believe we need to follow the perfect leader. For me, an example of a perfect leader is someone like Rupert Lowe and even Ben Habib. They're strong, they're classy, they're intelligent, they have all the ideas, they have all the solutions. That's the sort of person we need to follow, not these far-right nationalist morons. And if you go on to Restore Britain, Rupert Lowe's movement's website, all of his policies are perfect. I've listened to multiple of his podcasts. Every subject he talks about, he is bang on the money. Whether it comes to Islam, whether it's about immigration, whether it's about the economy, education, every subject he is bang on the money. And he's got a young man working with him who, when I've seen him talk in interviews, he's always bang on the money as well. These are the people we need to follow. Sensible, patriotic, strong, wise, conservative leaders who promote freedom. That's what Britain is all about. We're not about far-right authoritarianism, because the far-left communist authoritarians, we don't want to follow them, obviously, but the answer is not far-right authoritarianism. It's the same thing. When we follow authoritarians like the Nazis, you still lose all your freedom. I think these weirdos have this idea that we'll be living in a ethno-state and Britain will be white again and everything will be good if we follow the National Socialists. But it won't be good, because we'll be under an authoritarian regime. And if you disagree with them, you'll be thrown in a gulag. So if someone like me or you says, oh, hold on, I don't want you to deport my best friend from school who's from Hong Kong, you'll be thrown in a gulag. So be careful what you wish for. And let's support sensible politicians like Rupert Lowe and sensible spiritual leaders or spiritual people such as myself, such as Momus Najmi, such as many others who are starting to rise. And on that note, before I move to point 3, there is no hero or messiah who's going to save the country. You know, it's not going to be about Rupert Lowe or a Tommy Robinson or any specific person. It's going to be about many leaders who are going to help us. And many people need to step up. There's one guy I followed recently on YouTube, I think it's brilliant. He's only got a few thousand subscribers, called Vindicator. So Vindicator Strikes Back. If you look him up, he's a brilliant YouTuber. He's just a sensible working class man who went to Iraq and served there. He gives a load of solutions, tactics. He does a lot of great work. So he's a great leader. He's only got a few thousand followers on X, but he's a great leader. And our country will be saved by thousands of strong leaders in our country. You know, Tommy Robinson, Rupert Lowe, Vindicator, Ant Middleton, Peter McCormack. There's many great British men who need to stand up and be leaders. There's no messiah who's going to save us. Okay, and the third point I want to discuss is just, I've been thinking that basically there is going to be an inevitable collapse or some kind of civil war or revolution or even a financial collapse. And if you understand how the economy works and how bad our government is and how much money we're wasting, the debt and everything, it would not surprise me at all if in the next few years we have a massive financial collapse in this country. And I'm talking real bad. You know, I'm talking inflation going through the roof, the pound being pretty much very low worth, you know, pensions being gone, benefits not being able to be claimed because inflation's gone out of control. So I think that there is going to be some form of collapse, whether, as I said, financial, civil war, something's going to kick off in this country. And there's zero reason to have any fear. And what I've realized is things will always seem worse in your head than what they are in real life. And for example, COVID. If you said a year before COVID, there was going to be a worldwide pandemic and, you know, a virus is going to come in and we're going to have to shut down. Like, it sounds like something from a horror movie and you'd be petrified. When in reality, when we lived through it, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that scary. The mind will make things more scary than what reality is. And that's why I think what we can do is prepare for a collapse. And I was listening to a podcast of a guy who was in Argentina when things collapsed. And he was just giving sensible advice. He's saying, look, you don't need to be overly scared. You just need to prepare. And prepare sensibly. You don't need to buy land off grid and separate yourself. He says the opposite. You need to maybe move out the main towns, but be around good friends and family and a community where you're all in it together. So try and remain good with your family. Try and be friendly with your neighbors. Try and have friends who are in a WhatsApp group who, if things do collapse somewhat, you can come up with, or you can help each other. Just simple things like having enough food for a month stocked up. If you want to protect your money, buy Bitcoin or gold to protect your money. Start getting fit to protect yourself in case, law and order breaks down, which could happen. And with the amount of weirdos we've got in our country, they could be trying to take advantage of the situation. So just make sure that you're physically prepared, and make sure you've got cameras in your home, and that you've got enough security measures. And these are just not dramatic things. They're just simple things you need to do. And you may be unable to start businesses from it. You may be able to set up security teams for your local neighborhood, or collecting medical supplies for the elderly. There's plenty of things you may be able to do when the system collapses as a job. This is what this gentleman was saying. So if you want to learn more about what he was saying, check out Gavin Bobby's recent video on YouTube. He touches on this. And if you just look up Argentinian financial collapse blog, the guy who talks about it has a blog, and you can follow him. If you just type it in YouTube or Google, I'm sure you'll be able to find him. And even personally, it's funny enough, a few months ago, I was around a friend's, and there was a power cut. And obviously you can't charge your phones. The internet went down, lights off, everything. I was thinking, well, if this happens more regular, it's a bit, you can't get on the internet or anything. So then I was thinking, all right, I need to buy some power banks to charge my phone. And I was even thinking about getting Starlink so that I can have access to the internet if there is some form of crisis. And obviously, if you can't get petrol for your car, buying a bicycle so that I can still make trips on my bike long distance rather than having to walk places. You can cycle somewhere in half hour that would take you probably 3-4 hours to walk. So just make simple preparations for any collapse that may happen. And you never know what may happen. The government may fall, and we may implement a new sort of positive government, or there may be some positive change that means that things don't collapse. But we just have to be prepared, because the way things are going, something bad definitely will happen. But again, there's zero reason to be fearful. And I always say on my other channel, the main focus should be, as long as you have some form of spiritual approach to life, everything will always be kept in perspective, and that will be the solid rock that you can stand upon. Okay, so that's just pretty much an update that I wanted to provide for people. As time goes on, I'm still working on plans and trying to come up with things, whether I carry on myself or join a movement such as Restore Britain, or just trying to figure out solutions. This is not about individuals. It's about what we can do as a collective, or even whether it make it more local or a spiritual business, or not even business, but movement to help people in the country. That's my main goal of this movement. And my ideal situation would be if I could be put in charge of Christianity, reform it, make it more spiritual, get everybody back to church, and then everybody in the church, that would be the community of where we make strongholds. And that's the sort of idea that would be amazing, but obviously I do not think it's going to happen. But that's why I've set up the Guardians of the United Kingdom, and let's see what happens. Opportunities will arise, things will change, and I'll keep everybody updated as time goes on, as usual. Okay, so I hope everybody is well. Let me know in the comments what you think about what's going on in the country. Any solutions that you come up with. I hope everybody is well. God bless everybody. Goodbye.